My name is John Passfield. In a moment, I'm going to read from my novel. The title of this video will be Eisenstein, Video 1, An Artist on Trial. Here is the cover of the novel. Death Day, The Apology of Sergei Eisenstein, a novel by John Passfield. And before I read on this particular topic, I'll read the summary on the back cover of the novel. On March 19, 1937, world-renowned Soviet filmmaker Sergei Eisenstein appears before the All-Union Creative Conference of Workers in Soviet Cinematography, accused of having failed to create films which reflect the social and political orthodoxy of the Stalinist regime. Reeling from an unrelenting barrage of questions, accusations, and threats, the filmmaker struggles to respond to the dilemma which is faced by all artists in totalitarian states: how to reconcile one's freedom of imagination and creativity with the conformity to the artistically stifling orthodoxy which is demanded by the rulers of society. His response is an example of the ingenuity which has often been displayed by artists in brutally repressive regimes. This novel, Death Day, is an exploration of the plight of the artist in a repressive society and the strategies that such artists devise in order to ensure their own physical survival and the continuation of their ability to create art under brutal social conditions. Now, the decade of the 1930s in Soviet Russia is a time of public accusations, confessions, convictions, and executions of people in all walks of life. For some, the crime is opposition to the rulers of the communist state. For others, many of them loyal communists, the crime of which they are accused is simply the independence of their ideas. In this video, I will read from the last chapter of the novel, Chapter 18, Apology 7. The frame of this chapter and of the whole novel is the apology which the artist Sergei Eisenstein is being forced to make. Now, this is certainly an apology, an abject, humiliating apology, but in this novel, and therefore in the mind of the main character, Sergei Eisenstein, the apology is embedded in an image context, which might make it exactly the opposite of an apology. I will read a note on that possibility after I've read the apology. Now, just a couple of things. I think one of the most iconic situations in literature is King Lear on the Heath. In the surface of that story, King Lear is being pelted by the wind and the rain. But at the image level of that story, he's being pelted by all of the imagery of his past life and his present situation. And his task is to process that imagery, not process that imagery from the comfort of an easy chair in an old folks' home, but under great distress at the moment. He's out there on the heath being pelted. And so that's Sergei Eisenstein on stage at the Bolshoi Theater. All of the imagery of his life is he is being bombarded by that imagery and has to process that imagery very quickly because he's on trial for his whole career, the continuation of his career, and possibly for his life if they consider that he's a traitor. The other thing is that there's two responses, I think, in Sergei Eisenstein. The one is the apology, which I'll read from today. The other, though, is the films. The apology has imagery in it, which I will read. The films have imagery in them. And, when I first thought of writing a novel on the topic of Sergei Eisenstein, I thought, wow, I'd love to write a novel about a creative person. I have the imagery that the creative person is creating. That would be the films, particularly Battleship Potemkin. But I don't know about writing a novel about a person who's loyal to Stalinist communism. I was born in 1945. I lived through the Cold War. We thought of Stalinist communism as brutal in the extreme, the very opposite of the democracies that we lived in. I'm Canadian and lived in Canada all my life. But then I got looking at the Sergei Eisenstein biographies, and sure enough, he spoke not glowingly necessarily, but always carefully and fairly positively about communism, both when he was in Russia, as you would expect, but also when he was outside of Russia in the United States and in Mexico. He was always careful to speak positively because he always figured he was going back home, of course, and probably because he was a loyal communist. But then when I looked at his films, Battleship Potemkin for sure, but also Alexander Nevsky, I thought, oh, I think I see a really interesting image dynamic that is going on in his life and in his mind that really gives me the novel. And so I went ahead and wrote the novel. So keep that in mind. I'm not going to read from Alexander Nevsky, the imagery of that film in this reading, but I will in another reading. Here I'm going to read just the apology. This is surface imagery, I guess we'll say, not subversive imagery. Chapter 18, page 179. I stand on stage at the Bolshoi Theater and look around the auditorium at the faces of my colleagues in the film collective. I face a wall of helmets, spears, and shields. Well, not literally, but this is imagery from the film he hopes to make, Alexander Nevsky, which, if I was reading the whole chapter, would be running through his mind at a different level. I'm leaving that out of this reading. I see a dance macabre whirling in front of my eyes. I see a multitude of faces, the faces of those who have prevented the realization of my films. I see their skeletons beneath their cardboard masks. Well, that is an image from the film Que Viva Mexico, which was aborted. He filmed it, but he never got to edit the film. So he's thinking in imagery of his films as he's thinking of his situation here on the stage of the Bolshoi Theater. I see their skeletons beneath their cardboard masks, as I read before, but I have no time for vituperation or denigration. My health is not the best. My time is growing short. I must hurry on in my life to other things. All I need now is the permission of my colleagues that I may continue with the making of my films. Every word that I have said today is directed to that end. Perhaps the alms of the rich will be tossed to a beggar man. Well, that's silent thought as he's standing there on stage. Here are the words he speaks to these people sitting in the theater judging him. Comrades, it has been said, and rightly so, that the making of a film constitutes a form of revolutionary practice in which the genius of the artist works hand in hand with the socialist offensive of the proletariat. It has also been said that my development as a filmmaker occurred under very unfavorable circumstances, and that my first films, Battleship Potemkin among them, were not subjected to any serious Marxist criticism. I was highly praised, but the essential questions concerning the inner contradictions of my creativity were never raised. I can agree that this situation hampered and complicated the growth of my creative powers. Well, that's what he says out loud. Here's some more of his inner thoughts. I pause and reach for the hourglass and then remember once again that it is empty. I look around the auditorium at a phalanx of eyes that seem to offer no relief. Well, phalanx is from the proposed film that he hopes to get to make, Alexander Nevsky. I am dying for lack of a glass of water. My left arm is as numb and heavy as a log of wood. I am feeling faint, but I am determined to persevere. I know that my health is not of the best. I know that my heart is laboring under the weight of my many concerns. It is difficult to speak, but I am saying what I wish to say, and I will see my speech through to the very end. More of the words that he speaks out loud. I am sure that we all agree that the artist must set himself ever more serious tasks and aspire to raise his creative power to the level of the high demands imposed upon art by the working class. He should not remain stationary, but should evolve with the times I would hope that you, comrades, will agree that I desire to keep pace with the impetuous tempo of our epoch in order that my films will be in close keeping with the demands of the socialist offensive. Continuing on with his speech, I hope that you will conclude, comrades, that contrary to what might have been said about me, both before and since the cancellation of the production of my film Pheasant Meadow, that I will submit myself to social re-education, to the merciless criticism of my colleagues, and will strive to reject the many illusions that have hampered me in seeking to become a dialectical materialist. More of his own private inner thoughts. I'm dying of thirst. My tongue is swelling and my mouth is parched and dry. I would take my pulse, but I would look and feel ridiculous. If only I could read the faces of my colleagues. One smile, one positive nod, one friendly wave would make it easier to proceed. If only I could read what is in their minds. If I could know that they could see themselves in me. They're all filmmakers, by the way. I know that the walls of my heart are weak. Perhaps it's only a matter of time before those walls will stretch to the point where the heart itself will burst and my breathing will cease. I know that a vulture waits like a lump in my chest to pounce at any signs of weakness. But I am determined that I will live to make another film. And then he speaks out loud again. I admit, comrades, that the crisis in my development has such deep roots that its solution will be possible only through a complete revaluation of values. I trust that you will have no reason for doubting that I can surmount the contradictions of my creative growth and that I will be able to give my work far more completeness and depth than I have in the past. Please do not doubt that I will be able to turn to decisive rearming, overcome my traits of class limitation, and make closer relationships with the attacking class in order to create real revolutionary cinema productions. Comrades, he continues, I do not minimize the difficulties confronting me. The way out of my personal crisis is possible only through a stubborn campaign for re-education, through merciless exposure and criticism of my past films. I believe that the method of dialectical materialism is a necessary condition for my further creative growth as an artist. Only by mastering it, only by conquering the limitations of my thought, will I be able to produce films worthy of the gigantic epic in which we are now living. And the pause during which he thinks to himself. No, sorry, skipping ahead to more of the speech, my mistake. Comrades, I come before you at a time of crisis in my career. I thank you for allowing me to present myself to you in all humility. I beg you not to end a career today, a career which I feel has only just begun, to appreciate the means by which it will be able to fulfill the promise of its potential. With your permission, comrades, and above all with your help, I will yet be able to produce the authentic achievements of socialist art of which I feel myself to be capable. I throw myself on your mercy. I can only hope that through your belief in my sincerity and truth of my reform, I will be allowed to continue with my life's work. I beg you to let me make another film. And then personal thoughts. My speech of apology is finished. I look around at my colleagues. Not one face is willing to indicate its thoughts. I fold my handwritten notes and stuff them raggedly into my briefcase, my heart thumping as I fumble with the buckle on the leather strap. So there's a bit more, but I won't read it. But that's pretty well the end of the novel. Will he get to make any more films? Will they even not only withdraw his earlier films from circulation, but even destroy them? That's a question that is being asked. So he really is King Lear on the Heath, being pelted with the not only the images of his life, past and present, but the question of whether his life itself will continue. Let me read from a note that I have written about the novel. Every one of my novels has a problem-solving premise. In this novel, Death Day, the problem for the main character, Sergei Eisenstein, is how to prolong his filmmaking career. With this as his primary goal, I expect his attitude, this was written at the beginning of the planning and writing, I expect his attitude towards communism and towards the art of film to be ambivalent. How sincere is he in his claim that he is a fervent communist who wants to serve the cause with his art? I mean, he has to say that. He's on trial. What else can he say? If he doesn't say he's a fervent communist who wants to be a better communist, there's no way he'll be allowed to continue with his filmmaking career. So is he sincere when he says it, or is it a subterfuge? And then the other question is, how much is he willing to give up artistically in order to get permission to proceed? Is he willing, if he's allowed to make more films, to make orthodox communist state-serving films? Or will he somehow manage, and this is where imagery comes into play. Imagery is fascinating. Will he manage to make personal films in the guise of propaganda films for this state? So does the main character, Sergei Eisenstein, outsmart the repressive Soviet censorship apparatus? Well, you can explore this question by reading the rest of the novel or by listening to another video, which I will call Alexander Nevsky, which is the title of a film whose imagery, if Sergei Eisenstein is allowed to make it, might just serve to subvert the aims of the Soviet film collective. It's a fascinating film when you think of this question of, was Sergei Eisenstein a loyal communist, or was he quite independently minded? So a propaganda film would serve the aims of the state. A personal film would serve the artist. I'm sure there were filmmakers in communist Russia and in the Soviet Union who could do both, and the imagery of the film had no difference, right? They believed what the authorities wanted them to believe. There are others, though, maybe, who thought, well, I don't believe exactly what the authorities believe, and whether consciously or subconsciously, I'm sort of proposing the idea here that a dissident filmmaker would be aware of what the imagery of his film is saying, but perhaps not, you know. Perhaps Sergei Eisenstein, the historical scientist, Sergei Eisenstein, never thought about his films being subversive in imagery. Perhaps it's only me. The character Sergei Eisenstein in this novel really doesn't say. It's up to the reader to think about it. It's all happening at a conscious but mostly a subconscious level in his mind. So that's what makes it so fascinating. Now, the title of the novel, as I mentioned earlier, is Death Day, The Apology of Sergei Eisenstein, a novel by John Passfield. It's available on Amazon. If you have a look at my website, johnpassfield.ca, johnpassfield.ca, there's 2 free books there, both about this novel, and just by clicking a button, they're yours for no money required at all. One's a planning notebook, from the first idea through the working out of the concept of the novel, the writing of the novel, and so on, till I had a rough draft. The other's a journal, which really is reflections on all the topics about imagery, about novel writing, about creativity, filmmaking, repressive societies, free societies, that occur when one is writing a novel like this and reading it as one polishes it. So you go to my website, johnpassfield.ca, go up to notebooks and click on that, go down to the Eisenstein icon, click on that. There's a notebook, go to the word journals and click on that, and then go down to the icon of the journal and click on that. There's 2 free books you can read for free. And lastly, I'll just say thank you for watching this video.